It is now my extreme pleasure to introduce our speaker for today, our pastor, Reverend Steve Adkins. Reverend Steve has been developing his spiritual gifts over the past 30 years. He's traveled extensively and studied at the Arthur Findlay College, so he's demonstrated in the UK and here. Reverend Steve is the certified spiritualist medium and healer and an inspired teacher. Please help me to welcome Steve Adkins.
Morning, everybody. Morning. Open this with a little inspirational talk, or reading out of this book that I carry. We know God by spiritual vision. We feel that He is beside us. We feel His presence. Contact with God is not made by the senses. Spirit consciousness replaces sight. Since we cannot see God, we have to perceive Him by spiritual perception. God has to span the physical and the spiritual with the gift to us of spiritual vision. Many persons, though they cannot see God, have had clear spiritual consciousness of Him. We are inside a box of space and time, but we know there must be something outside of that box, limitless space, eternity of time, and God. As we move into this Memorial Day weekend, I'd like to take a moment to honor those that have given up their lives in the service of the country, as this is what this holiday is about. So I'd like us just to take a moment, and if we know anyone that has done that, or know someone whose children have done that, just take a moment and think a thought of blessing and thanks towards them. If you do not, then you can still think a thought of blessing and thanks for those that have done this. Not that we condone war or violence, but the intention of the people that were involved in this is what we feel. Thank you. As we think of those that have sacrificed in this fashion, this is what I like to call generational blessings. These are people known and unknown to us that have given of their time, their energy, and sometimes all that they have to allow us to be where we're at with the opportunities that we have. This is not to say that we don't deserve the opportunities that we have, but it is to allow us to more appreciate the opportunities that we may take for granted. The ability to get out of bed in the morning, the ability to walk where we want to walk, physical as well as personal freedom to do these things. Many people, our parents, all the way down to the line of people who fought for the freedoms, have given these generational blessings to us to allow us these opportunities for us. When we think of these things, of people that have passed over, people that have, as we would feel sometimes, had their lives cut short, I ask myself personally, and look at my idea of God, my feeling of, and my relationship to God when these things occur on a personal level as well as a professional level. On a personal level, as an individual, without using my second sight, I feel very much like everyone else. I feel a loss and a missing, and sometimes wonder at the why of how people are chosen to be the ones that pass over at that time. To tell you that I've got an answer for that would be misleading you. To tell you that I have come to a place of comfort through spiritual belief is true. as we examine our relationship with God, we begin to more fully understand the action in our lives and the action in the lives of others around us. If we believe that God has an overall plan for all of creation and that we have a part in it, then we have to believe that we are cared for as much as anyone else, and anyone else is cared for as much as us. When I first started thinking about this subject several weeks ago, there's a little landscape strip outside of my office, and there's a pair of mallard ducks that come there and roost there every single year for the past 8 years. Now this is next to a driveway that heavy equipment, line trucks, everything imaginable, big as this building, some of them, go down that driveway. And those ducks come there and roost there every year and have their young there. This year, Mama Duck had about 10 little ducklings. And there's ponds out behind the place, drainage ponds that have been there for about 25 years. So there's a lot of big fish in there, a lot of huge alligator snapping turtles in there. And Mama Duck leads her 10 little ducks out across that pond. And each day, a few more were missing. Until finally, after about 4 days, there were no baby ducks left. So this gave rise to my thought, does God not love baby ducks? You know? I mean, seriously, we have to believe that God loves infants of all kinds. God has to love all of everything within His creation equally. So the only thing that we can conclude by this particular concept is that we know that they're within the cycle of nature, that by these baby ducks passing away, that other animals are sustained in this large system. Now this is real easy to look at it at arm's distance, but when it's your loved one laying in bed getting ready to pass, it's a little hard to feel that universal connection to God's plan with things. But the fact of the matter is we are part of the same system that those animals are. Maybe not the role, maybe we're not quite sacrificed quite so readily by things in our environment to sustain things in our environment. But you have to feel that we are also part of a larger plan of things. Everything that happens to us, and I'm not talking about predestiny, the energetics of our lives and our free will, which animals do not have free will, move us to different opportunities than what most animals have that are not conscious reasoning beings as we are. But we still are within an overall plan of God that God has for our lives. So I have to believe that the difficult things that happen to me as well as the nice things that happen to me all contribute to the larger plan of creation, even if I don't know it. I, as a spiritualist, part of my spiritual quest is to go by observed facts and conclusions that I draw from them in the situations around me, in people, in nature, in everything that occurs. So when I observe those things, I have to draw conclusions from them. And this is also, as I spoke about before, a thing called co-development. It's one of the 3 ways of personal development, spiritual development in the world today. Within this system of co-development, there is myself and my experiences, as well as God's inspiration, as well as that which I observe around me. And you see, I keep saying I and me. It's about me. It's not about other people and what they're doing to me. It's not about what God might be doing to me. It's about my understanding of these things as they occur. And just like these baby ducks, there has to be an overall contributing thing for everything that happens to me and how I react to it. There has to be a portion of that that goes out to the universe and somehow supports this overall plan of creation in some fashion. Maybe not everything that I do for the situations that I'm involved in, But part of this has to be determined or contribute to a larger plan of creation. And usually I attribute that part of it to things that I don't understand. But I have faith that that's what's happening. This allows me to put things into perspective in my life. Recently, last week, I had mentioned that a good friend of mine was going through a very difficult time. He passed away at 5 this morning. And I was called to the house yesterday, and it's always a difficult time for me because if I know the people, you know, a friend of mine like that, I've known the family, I've known his children since they were this big, and I've known him, you know, quite a number of years. And I go there as a friend and am asked to act as a spiritualist minister. So it's a difficult role to play when you get there. They start asking you questions like, why is this happening to my loved one? You know, why is this happening to my dad? It's happening to my good friend too, you know. And sometimes you don't have anything to say. Sometimes there's nothing you can say, so I just be a friend at the time. And it was kind of funny because they told me that he had lapsed into a state of a coma-like state. And I went over there and I took a CD. And this particular guy used to be a rock and roll DJ. He used to play all kinds of rock and roll from the time he was this big. And a lot of our times, even recently, I'd go over and I'd bring back these old songs that he hadn't heard in a long time from some of the real old groups. And he just really enjoyed that time. He told me so before he passed. He said, I was telling him, I said, listen to, you know, it doesn't matter if you got 5 days, 5 weeks, or 5 years, Paul. You need to just enjoy yourself. Be happy about memories and times and things that have gone on in your life. Be happy when it comes, whether it's tomorrow or a year from now. So he started talking about some of the times, and he surprised me. He said one of the best times he had recently was when I came over in my truck about a year ago and put on this tape, and we listened to this tape riding down the road talking about things that we had done in our past. So I took over this CD when they told me he had gone into a coma, and I played a song on it. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with rock and roll, but this was called Simple Man by Leonard Skinner. It's a real nice song that brings back a lot of memories. And his son, who's now a Hasidic Jewish person, said, why did you play that song for him? Why didn't you play something light and easy? I said, that's Amazing Grace, the rock and rollers, Joey. He said, well, I can understand that. So it was a nice time, you know, it was a mellow time, and I spoke to the family, and they asked me, you know, what I thought. I said, well, I think the spirit's pretty well going right now, that this is just a biological function that's going to wind down by 5 o'clock tomorrow morning. And I've done this a number of times on deathbed visits, you know, been able to sense the approximate time of passing. Something else I've noticed is that they won't pass with people in the room. It's too much of a shock to them to pass as a general rule. Now that does happen sometimes, but as a general rule, the spirit won't let the body expire while people are around. They don't want to see that shock of that happening. So I told him, I said, leave the room about 3:30 and just keep cracking the door a little bit and checking on them, you know, every 20, 30 minutes. And that's what they did. And like I said, I've done a lot of deathbed visits as a healer to people. I don't get the easy ones. When I decide to start doing my healing practice, I just decide, and the universe starts sending people to me. And it's always these people that are bound to their beds and can't get out, that have been given up on by the healing profession. And you get the same questions every time. Why is this happening to my loved one? It doesn't matter. I once saw a guy that had put together one of the largest healing organizations and metaphysical organizations in the United States. And he called me out of Casadega to come and do a healing on him. And it was kind of funny because when I got there, his family asked the same questions as people that had no real spiritual discipline. Why is this happening to my loved one? the same feeling, the same energetics. And I had the same answer, not much. Not much of an answer. When we encounter these things, as I said, you have to just have a higher belief in things that are going on. Moving on, you have to have faith in a life after death. If you don't have faith in life after death in some fashion, then these things are pretty finite and they're pretty consuming. And that's what I was for a number of years. I lost a sister and a father when I had no conscious spiritual belief system, and all I was angry for a while. And I think that that's what happens to a lot of people is they get a resentment because their loved ones were taken. They get very upset about things, especially when children are taken from parents. I've never had that happen to me, but I've had a sister a year younger than me pass away at 21 from a drug overdose. And again, I found her as she was dying. So it still takes a little bit to get by some of these things. But again, as you have a spiritual belief in God, I've had her come back to me, and I've had loved ones come back to me through mediums and other people. And just as recently as last week, I had been advertising Eamon Downey's advanced students, and it was over in Apopka, and I went there, and I was sitting there, and they were bringing through people to everybody else, and I was sitting there thinking, the people that I know in spirit are pretty evidential because they all passed before I was 30. They weren't. And somebody brings through somebody that was younger than 30, that's pretty evidential. Not your mother or your father. Somebody looks at me in my 60s, and they can pretty well guess that either my mother or my father or both are in spirit. Definitely my grandparents are in spirit. But when they bring through a childhood friend like that, it's pretty, even me who's done it a lot of times, I'm very moved by it. And they brought through this woman that I had known. There was a group of us that ran around. We were typical 60s hellraisers and teenagers and just really out there. And she had married one of the guys in the group and moved off and had ended up being murdered in another state at about her mid-30s. And they brought her through to me. They couldn't quite understand how she passed because in traditional mediumship, the cause of passing is important to be able to get. And they were stumbling with it, trying to figure out what it was, and they couldn't. It was sudden, it was unexpected, it was this, it was that, and they couldn't quite get that she had been murdered. And that energy is a bit difficult for us to feel in our conscious mind to encounter that, and that's why they had a hard time with it. But they got a lot of very specific things. I knew who it was, and it was very nice to see that. And it was funny because before that, like I said, I was sitting there saying, how come none of my friends ever come through to me? Yeah, why not me? And they stood up, and it was the last message of the night, and it was a tandem demonstration where two people stand up and work together, and they brought through this woman to me. And it was very comforting. So it doesn't matter how much you believe, how often you see it. It's nice when you feel that intimate connection to Spirit, feel that connection to God. It's what is the healing nature of things. So I ask you to find that moment within your lives to build that personal connection with God. Spiritualists don't give an idea of God, just that there is a God. Each person needs to find that personal connection with God. We don't interfere with that. We allow you to find that and believe in that. And anything that I say up here is intended for you to take where you're at, not how I'm explaining it. Take it into yourself. Take it, make it your own, and let it speak to you how it speaks to you. Don't question it, because that's what counts. It's how it speaks to you as an individual. even if you don't agree with my interpretation of it, the energy of it moving through you is what has the effect. I remember that I had given this Scottish gentleman a reading. His granddaughter had put the reading for him. He was like in his 80s and was fresh over from the country. And I'm Scottish myself. I sat there and I brought through 30 or 40 minutes of friends and things that had happened and how they had passed. And he looked like he'd been carved out of stone the whole time. I don't think he even breathed for 30 minutes. That's all the reaction I got out of him. And at the end of it, he said, I don't believe your explanation for what you're doing, even though every single thing you said is true to the last word. And I looked at him and I said, well, that's fine, because you will now seek your own explanation for what has occurred before you, because you cannot deny the fact of what has occurred. And this will move you in your life in the way that you choose to perceive it. You don't have to take my explanation for it. 10 years later, I was asked to do a eulogy at his funeral. And they had said that from that day forward, that man's life had changed, that he had begun to get out of the house. He started going down to old folks' homes and interacting with the people there and, being the life of the party. And it was like a whole different person than his granddaughter told me from that day forward. I never had another word with him from that day for 10 years. So we can be moved by our own guidance. That's the whole purpose of it. And it's a little lonely at times when we have to find those answers for ourselves. Like when my friend passed away. It's just, you just have to sort it out and find a comfort with it sometimes. Sometimes there is no reason that's going to be forthcoming. Sometimes we just ask for a comfort and a peace with what we've seen and what has occurred. And that is as much a blessing from God as knowing why. Sometimes you're just not going to know why. Sometimes our minds can't conceive of that overall universal picture of where we are within this universal plan. Sometimes it's beyond our mind's ability to understand that larger scope. So we fall back to the energy of God and ask for a comfort and a peace with what has happened. So I leave this with you today to sort this out, to find a comfort and a peace if I can't find the answer. My mind wants an answer. My soul wants peace and